The market square was still buzzing with gossip when Musa dragged his son out of the tailoring shop, holding a half-mended shirt and shame in his heart. Life as a single father in the dusty streets of Ogbomosho had never been kind, but that day, humiliation came in a different form. Across the road, a crowd gathered like flies around a wound, all staring at a woman in white, fat, sweating and sobbing into her own veil. Her makeup was running, her sandals had dusted over, and beside her stood a wedding cake untouched, melting slowly in the sun. Her groom had run after calling her a cow right in front of the church altar. The shame was fresh, the insult louder than a church bell, and no one stepped forward. Not one. Except Musa. Not because he wanted to marry, not because he knew her, but because his son was hungry, and somehow he knew what abandonment felt like. He crossed the road slowly, looked at the woman sitting hopeless on the bench, and said, "You look like you still want to be a wife. Me, I still want to be a husband. Shall we go?" She didn't believe it. Nobody did. The crowd roared with laughter, thinking it was some madman looking for attention. But Musa didn't flinch. His shirt had holes. His slippers were mismatched. But his eyes were steady. Her name was Aduni, and she was shaking when she said yes. Just like that, the wedding continued, but with a stranger as the groom. That evening, people called it a joke, a curse, a last-minute pity wedding. But Aduni's eyes had a light no one saw before. Not even her own family, who had already packed up the souvenirs and were whispering shame at the back of the hall. But the priest blessed them, the rings exchanged hands, and two broken people walked into a new kind of madness, hand in hand. Musa didn't know her history. Aduni didn't know his struggles, but something passed between them, pain perhaps, or survival. Whatever it was, it grew. The next day, their photo was on every WhatsApp status in town. People laughed. "See, the poor man and the overfed bride," they mocked. But Aduni cooked that morning. She didn't know where the money came from, but Musa's son Tope ate to his fill for the first time in weeks. She swept the floor of their one-room Face Me I Face You flat, fetched water, and even mended the same shirt Musa had taken to the tailor. She didn't talk much, but when she smiled, the neighbors began to forget her weight. They began to remember her face. 1 week later, Musa's landlord came knocking. He wanted to throw them out. 6 months' rent unpaid. Musa stood outside, his face blank. He expected no miracle. But Aduni walked out, head wrapped in a scarf, handed the landlord a brown envelope and said calmly, "Please count it." Inside was 6 months' rent and 3 more. Nobody knew she had a savings box she kept adding to every day while planning the previous wedding. It was meant to be her honeymoon money. Now it became their rent. Musa stood speechless, his pride burnt. His ego twitched. But his heart whispered something different. Gratefulness. He began to see her not as the woman everyone rejected, but as the one heaven sent in disguise. She didn't ask for attention. She didn't flaunt anything. But day by day, her presence started healing things in the house. She taught Tope his homework. She helped Musa set up a small table outside their compound, where he started sharpening knives for customers and earning something small. And every night, when the compound laughed and jeered behind curtains, Aduni would still cook, still sweep, still rub balm on Musa's tired back like she had nothing to prove. But she was proving everything. One night, during heavy rain, a knock came at their door. It was the former groom, the man who rejected her at the altar. He had come, dripping drunk and full of apologies. He claimed the devil had whispered, that he still loved her, that he wanted her back. Musa froze. Tope looked scared, but Aduni stepped forward, wrapped a cloth tighter around her chest, looked the man dead in the eye, and said one sentence that changed everything. "Even if you bring heaven, I have already found peace on earth." That was the day Musa truly fell in love with her. It started with whispers at first, quiet chatter behind louver windows, and giggles shared during evening water fetching. The people of Olarunleka compound could not understand what was changing in that corner room where the poor knife sharpener and his fat bride lived. They watched with confusion as Musa, once known for his silence and sagging shoulders, began walking straighter. His eyes that once looked like abandoned wells now shimmered with something else, joy perhaps. And Aduni? They could no longer laugh at her sighs because now all they saw was how clean their corridor had become, how sweet the aroma from her cooking danced into every nostril in the morning, and how Topi, the child who used to roam with torn shorts, now came home clean and smiling. It was Aduni. It was always her. She carried her weight not as shame, but as strength. The more people tried to mock, the more she grew radiant. She had started a small side hustle frying puff-puff by the roadside. The first week, children laughed at her, calling her puff-puff auntie, but their mothers started lining up by the second week because her puff-puff tasted like no other. Sweet, spongy, with a magic crisp on the edge. And behind the stand, her laughter grew louder. It was not a woman's laugh filled with regret. It was a laugh born of victory. Even when rain fell and scattered her stand, she would just wipe her face and start again the next day, with more fire than before. Musa watched all of this in silence. His heart grew heavy, not with pain but with disbelief. How could a woman so disgraced at the altar be so full of life? How could a woman so mocked be the reason his son now slept with a full belly and laughed in his dreams? One afternoon, while packing sharpened knives into his small bag, he looked at Aduni as she knelt by the basin washing clothes. Her hands were strong. Her back was wide. But her spirit, oh, it soared. And for the first time since their strange marriage, he asked himself a real question. What if this woman is my second chance? The moment his thoughts turned to love, the world seemed to test it. Trouble arrived wearing perfume and high heels. Her name was Rashida, Musa's ex, the woman who left him when Tope was barely 2. She had heard of his marriage. She had heard that the fat woman was making his life sweet. And so she returned, sashaying into the compound one hot afternoon, as if the past hadn't happened. With a plastic smile and dramatic hugs, she claimed she missed her son, claimed she had changed. But Aduni watched with the patience of a storm held back by grace. She did not speak. She did not panic. She simply stepped back and let Musa decide. And Musa, for the first time, saw Rashida for who she truly was. Not a lover, not a friend, but a shadow that had blocked his light. He stood between the two women, the past and the present, and without. Raising his voice, he said, "This house is built on peace now, and peace does not beg for drama." Rashida screamed. She cursed. She said Aduni had bewitched him. But no one listened, not even the neighbors. They had tasted Aduni's kindness. They had seen her wipe Musa's tears without words. And when Rashida left, even the gate refused to slam properly. It was as if the wind itself rejected her presence. That night, Aduni served ogbono soup with pounded yam. Musa looked at her, his hands trembling a little. He had nothing to give, but gratitude, yet her love made him feel like a king. After Tope slept, he brought out a small wrapped package, a beaded bangle he bought from a hawker weeks ago. It cost him a day's earnings. When he handed it to her, Aduni didn't cry. She only smiled and wore it proudly, as if it were diamond. But outside, someone else was watching. The same man who once left her at the altar, Jide. He had become a drunk, a mess, and every night he passed by their compound, trying to see the woman who used to beg for his love. Now he saw her carrying buckets with confidence, her skin glowing from palm oil and joy, her voice filling the air like a song. Regret is a wicked ghost. It sat beside him in every bar, whispered into every drink, reminded him of the bride he mocked. And the more he saw her live, the more he died inside. One day, Jide tried to make a scene. He stood outside the compound gate and began yelling, "Fat woman, that's all you are." But instead of shame, he was met with laughter, not from Aduni, but from the neighbors. One woman shouted, "If fat brings peace and food, I beg I want fat too." And the whole street erupted. Aduni simply came out with her puff-puff tray, looked him in the eye and said, "I hope the demons that told you to leave me are feeding you now." That night, Musa knelt beside the bed and said a prayer, something he hadn't done in years. He didn't ask for money or success. He only said, "God, thank you for shame, because it led me to glory." And that was when everything truly began to change. The school sent a letter home that week. Tope had been selected to represent the school in a spelling competition at the local government level. Musa held the letter like it was a gold certificate. The boy who once begged for pencils now stood as a champion in front of his class. Musa's hands trembled as he showed Aduni the paper. She read it, kissed the boy's forehead, and said nothing grand, just that they would be there, and they were. On the day of the competition, Aduni wore her brightest ankara with beads jangling at her wrist. Tope wore a clean shirt and borrowed shoes. They sat on the front row, her size drawing eyes as usual. Mothers whispered, children giggled. One woman even muttered, "Is that his mother, or a bus stop?" But Musa noticed something different in Aduni's posture. She had learned to wear insults like armor. Her chin didn't drop. Her smile didn't dim. She simply looked around with eyes that said, "You will all eat your words one day." Tope won third place. It wasn't the trophy that mattered. It was the pride in his father's eyes, the tears hiding in Aduni's smile. That day, Musa held Aduni's hand in public for the first time. He didn't care who stared. He didn't care what they whispered. His hand wrapped around hers, and in that grip was a declaration that said, "She is mine, and I am not ashamed." Later that week, things took a sudden turn. Aduni's puff-puff stand caught fire. No one knew how it started, but the small umbrella and the frying pan were reduced to ashes. Musa ran from the sharpening table when he heard the shouts. When he got there, he found Aduni trying to stamp out the final sparks with her slippers, sweat mixing with soot on her face. Her customers stood helpless, mouths covered in shock. Someone muttered, "So this is the end?" But Musa picked up the burnt tray and hugged his wife tightly, ignoring the black stains that smeared onto his own shirt. He whispered, "Your hands still work, so your dream is not dead." That evening, while they cleaned what little they could salvage, a man from the local church walked into the compound. He introduced himself as Pastor Tunda and explained that someone from the crowd had recorded Musa's public hand-holding gesture and posted it online. The video had gone viral, captioned, "When love sees beyond size." Hundreds of comments poured in, praising the courage, the loyalty, the beauty of the moment. And that very post caught the attention of a woman named Sister Yemisi, owner of a big catering company in Lagos. She had seen Aduni's puff-puff in earlier clips, read people's comments about the taste, and now wanted to meet the woman herself. Within days, Aduni was invited to Lagos. She was scared at first, unsure if it was a scam, but the church sponsored her trip. Musa borrowed a travel bag, and Tope held her wrapper tightly at the motor park, whispering, "Don't forget me." In Lagos, Yemisi welcomed her with open arms. A big kitchen was offered. Ingredients were lined up. "Cook," she said. Aduni did. She fried the puff-puff, with the same hands that once wiped rejection off her wedding gown. By the end of the session, every worker was begging for more. Yemisi offered her a job, not just as a cook, but as a culinary trainer. When she returned to Ogbomosho, Aduni wasn't just glowing, she was transformed. She had been offered an official position with monthly pay. The job included food allowance, transport, and the chance to teach women across towns how to build their own puff-puff businesses. And it didn't end there. Yemisi sent capital to restart her roadside stand in Ogbomosho as a brand ambassador for their local economic empowerment. The same neighbors who once jeered now lined up for photographs. Market women asked her for business tips. Even the woman who once called her a bus stop now wanted her daughter to learn under her. Musa watched all this unfold with silence in his mouth and storms of gratitude in his chest. He had married a rejected woman in front of gossipers and mockers, not knowing that she would become the pillar of their future. One morning he sat outside, sharpening a knife, while Tope read under a tree. Aduni walked out with fresh akara, wearing a wrapper that now fit her differently. Confidence had reshaped her more than any gym could. She handed him the plate and whispered, "Next month, they want to feature me on TV." And for the first time, Musa broke into tears in front of her. He cried because of shame that turned to pride. He cried because poverty once made him doubt he deserved happiness. He cried because the world tried to bury a woman simply because she was not slim enough to wear their standard of beauty. Yet here she was, shining. And all he had to do was say yes when the world said no. That night, he opened a notebook and began writing something slowly. A plan, a business idea, a dream they had never dared speak, a joint catering venture. It would be called Aduni's Hands, because those hands had fed a child, rebuilt a house, healed a man, and redeemed a name. The Ogbomosho sun rose hotter than usual that morning, but in the small one-room apartment of Musa and Aduni, joy was louder than heat. Aduni stood before a mirror, not applying makeup, not adjusting fake eyelashes, but tying her scarf, bold, bright, and beautiful like royalty. Today, a live TV crew from Lagos was arriving to feature her story. The same woman they had once called a rejected bride would now be watched by thousands. Tope danced around her, clapping his hands while holding a fake microphone, pretending to interview her. Musa, meanwhile, swept the compound like it was the palace courtyard. The neighbors peeked from windows, swept their fronts extra clean, and even the landlord wore his best booba, pretending he'd always been proud of them. By noon, the van arrived. Reporters stepped out, camera lights flashing, microphones pointed like swords of fame. Aduni welcomed them calmly, her sighs now carried with so much grace that it no longer looked like weight. It looked like strength. She was not nervous. She had stared shame in the eye before. What was camera light compared to public disgrace? She walked them through her story, not with drama, but with dignity. She told them about the altar, the running groom, the crowd that mocked her. She told them how a poor man she had never met stepped forward, offered not money or romance, but a second chance. She spoke of frying pans, burnt umbrellas, and a boy who used to sleep hungry. And she ended with her voice slightly shaking, saying, "Sometimes the people the world throws away are the very ones heaven plans to use for revival." The program aired that night. The next morning, Aduni's phone didn't stop ringing. Women from Ibadan to Akure were calling. Some wanted to learn, others just wanted to cry. One woman said, "I also wear size 22. Today you made me proud to breathe again." Another whispered, "My husband left me after childbirth, but your story gave me back my voice." What Aduni didn't know was that she had sparked a movement. Women who once hid behind wrappers now stood boldly in their yards. Plus-size ladies who had been rejected from jobs, relationships, and even family gatherings now quoted her name like scripture. On social media, she was trending, Adonis hands, and through it all, she still returned to the small compound every evening, still fried puff-puff with joy, still packed Tope's school bag, still helped Musa fix his sharpening bench. But as light grows, so does shadow. One afternoon, a black Prado Jeep parked in front of the compound. Out stepped a man in a fitted agbada, Jide, her former groom. But this time, he wasn't drunk, he wasn't ranting. He came with calm lips and dangerous intentions. He said he had been watching her rise. that he now had regrets, that he was ready to take responsibility. He even knelt in public, apologizing to Musa, claiming he never understood her worth until the world showed him. But Aduni looked at him, not with anger, but with pure pity. She said quietly, "You left me when I was full of love but low in public value. You now return because others see what you never had eyes for. You are not here for me. You are here for the version of me you rejected but fame repackaged." Musa said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence was a shield. But Jide wasn't done. He took to social media, claiming Aduni's entire fame was built on falsehood, that she orchestrated her own rejection for sympathy. He paid fake bloggers to write nonsense. He leaked old photos, tried to twist her past, dug into her school records, even claimed she had once borrowed money she never paid back. The comments turned dark. The messages weren't all praises anymore. Even the neighbors began asking questions. Rumors spread like hot groundnut oil. Aduni sat one evening, head bowed, puff unsold. Her hands trembled as she held a screenshot of a hate comment that read, "She's just a fat fraud in wrapper." Musa knelt beside her. He didn't bring advice. He brought presence. Tope came too, holding a paper where he had drawn her frying puff with angel wings. He said, "Mummy, you're my hero, and heroes don't cry because of cowards." That night, something unusual happened. Women across town began to post photos of themselves wearing wrappers and holding frying pans. They used the hashtag again, Adonis hands. One video showed 10 plus-size ladies dancing to drums outside a school gate, singing, "No shame in our size, no lie in our light." Another post featured an old woman holding her breast cancer scars, saying, "Even after 2 surgeries, I still cook for 12 grandchildren. Aduni, you gave me pride." By morning, the tide had turned again. Bloggers who once shared Jide's lies began deleting the posts. One TV station aired a full interview with Aduni's old classmates, neighbors, and even the tailor who mended her wedding dress. All confirmed her story, that she had been humiliated, that Musa stepped in without expectation, that love grew not through beauty, but through grace. Musa finally looked at her that evening, held her face in both hands and said, "You were never fat in the wrong way. You were full where the world was empty." And in that moment, with lanterns flickering and the smell of bean cakes in the air, she leaned her head on his shoulder. Her scarf felt heavier now, not because of shame, but because it had become a crown. The wedding she never had finally happened, not with roses, not with gold, but with purpose and power. 1 year after the altar rejection that became a miracle, the town of Ogbomosho was lit up again, but this time not for shame. Beneath the same old church roof where Aduni was once humiliated, chairs were lined with golden ribbons, women wore geel that reached the sky, and the compound was too small for the crowd that came. It wasn't just a wedding renewal ceremony, it was a thanksgiving. Aduni stood at the door in a dress she designed herself, made by local tailors, stitched with patterns that told a story of brokenness turned to blessing. Her hands held Musa's. Those same rough hands that once sharpened knives now trembled with love. Tope stood between them, holding a Bible and smiling like he had seen heaven walk into his home. People came from Ibadan, Akure, Lagos, even Port Harcourt. They came not to see a fat bride or a poor husband. They came to witness the woman who turned mockery into movement. Journalists clicked photos. TV crews whispered, "She's even more radiant in real life." Pastors gave speeches. Local women's associations brought kegs of oil and baskets of yam. The entire community, once poisoned by gossip, now celebrated like it was their own victory. As they exchanged vows, Musa's voice cracked, not from nervousness, but from memory. He remembered that day he crossed the road to a woman crying on a bench in a torn wedding gown. He remembered how people laughed, but now they cheered. He looked into her eyes and said, "You were never God's mistake. You were my hidden glory." After the event, Aduni was invited to speak at a national empowerment summit for women in business. Her speech moved even the senators' wives. She told them how poverty had no shame sharper than hunger, how her husband didn't rescue her with money, but with dignity, how a woman, no matter her size or scars, could build a house of joy with bare hands. The media called it the speech of the year. A magazine placed her on the front cover with the title, "The Queen of Ogbomosho." But she didn't let it change her spirit. Every morning she still packed Tope's lunch. She still cleaned the corridor. She still fried puff-puff with that secret twist of nutmeg and love. Her brand grew beyond expectation. She partnered with food delivery apps, trained hundreds of women, launched branded stalls called Aduni's Hands in over 10 cities. But at the center of it all remained one simple kitchen in their compound, where she cooked with slippers on and gospel songs playing from a transistor radio. Then came the scholarship. A global NGO that supported women-led businesses selected her for a trip to Kenya to train village women. Musa insisted she go. Tope begged her to bring back a souvenir giraffe. When she stood at the airport with her passport for the first time, tears rolled down her cheeks. Not because she feared the flight, but because a woman once too ashamed to face a mirror was now flying to share her light with the world. In Kenya, she stood in front of a group of women with rough palms and hard eyes. They expected a foreign expert, but instead saw a woman in African wrapper with curves and confidence. She told her story without filters, and as she spoke, the women leaned in. Some wept, some laughed, but all of them listened like they were breathing in something holy. When she finished, a young girl hugged her and whispered, "Now I believe God did not waste me." That evening, as she watched the sunset over Nairobi, she opened her notebook and wrote, "I did not rise by beauty. I rose by becoming unafraid of who I already was." Back in Nigeria, Musa had fixed up their house, painted the walls, bought new chairs. When Aduni returned, the neighbors lined the streets singing. The compound was no longer a "face me, I face you." It was now called the Queen's Yard. And for the first time, the landlord offered to register the house in both their names. Even the women who once mocked her now brought their daughters to sit at her feet during Saturday lessons. One night, under the glow of the lantern, Musa asked, "Aduni, what's next?" She smiled, leaned back and said, "We teach, we raise. We help every woman the world once laughed at. We turn every too fat, too poor, too late into too blessed to fall again." As sleep settled on their tiny room that held more peace than most mansions, Musa watched her face. The lines of sorrow were gone. In their place were laugh lines, wisdom lines, and glow lines no cream could manufacture. He remembered the first time he saw her, crushed, ashamed, abandoned in a wedding gown that no longer fit her spirit. But now, she didn't wear gowns to fit people's expectations. She wore them like armor and walked into destiny. Tope, now growing taller, once told his teacher during career day, "My mummy is a fighter who never used fists. She used food, love, and wrapper." The teacher laughed, but the truth was sharp. Aduni had fed the hungry, clothed the shamed, and loved without complaint. She wasn't just the best wife Musa ever had. She was the kind of wife he never imagined he could pray for, and that, perhaps, is the deepest kind of miracle. Not just to be loved after being rejected, but to become the one who teaches the world that rejection is not the end. It's the beginning of something only God can explain.